Right, so before I add the login and registration functionality on the app, I just remembered something. Now, the same app is going to be used by service providers and the consumers. So we need a way of identifying whether a user is a service provider or a consumer. So I'm going to go back to the API, and in the user models, I'm going to add one more property, and I'm going to call this is service provider, and it's going to be a boolean. What am I doing? Yeah. And by the way, I'm using tabline, so that's why I'm getting auto completion here. So it predicts what I want to write. Cool. So now that we've got this set up, we can go ahead and look at the app. Before I do that, remember we initially we had an empty array when we requested for all users. So let's check what we've got now. Now that we've registered a couple of users, we should get a bunch of users. As you can see, this is what we get. Right. Yeah, let's go to the app now. Alright, cool. So this is the app here, and this is the Ion select, which is this part here. So I'll put everything under an Ion item, and then the label service is this part here, and then the Ion select is the drop down list, and these are the options inside. And I tied this element to a variable called selected service, which is this here. And then once the value changes, it's going to call this function, and it's going to pass the event, and here's the function here, and there's the event, and I'm setting selected value to whatever is selected, and then I'm console logging it here. Right, and then so this h4 has a style, has a heading. This is just basic CSS, and then I've got this section here, which is just an Ion list, which is just a container, and then I've got items inside. So from here to here is this item here. It's called an Ion item, and I've got an Ion thumbnail, which is this part, and the slot is at the start of the item. So the start is here, this position. Then I've got an image and the source, and then I've got an Ion label, which is here. Then I've got an h3 inside with that class of heading, and it's the name. We've got a p tag, which is going to be the bio. We've got an Ion badge with the color of dark, which is going to be the service that the person is providing. And I just copied and pasted and changed a few items inside here. So we've got these three service providers. Now if you've never used Ionic before, I suggest that you go to YouTube and search for an basic Ionic tutorial to teach you how to install everything, the CLI and all that. Right, I'm just going to be focusing on building the app. Okay, cool. So I'm going to open a terminal here, and I want to add a page called login. So I'm going to say Ionic generate page under pages, and the page name is going to be login. So that's going to get generated. This looks weird. Alright, so under pages we've got the login page. I also need the registration page, so I'm going to write the same command, which is Ionic generate page under pages, and the name of the page is going to be register. Okay, cool. Let me try close the terminal and open it again. It still looks the same. Okay. For this tutorial, I'm just gonna use local storage. I'm not gonna install any external package for local storage. I'm gonna use just local storage. Okay, so we need to check if a user is logged in or not. If the user is not logged in, we are gonna redirect the user to the login page, right? So let's just check now whether the login page is working or not. Right, it's working. So we want to redirect the user to the login page if they're not logged in. So first and foremost, I need to have a lifecycle method. So this needs to implement on init. Then we need to override that function. So this on init function is a live cycle method. Whatever is in here will get called, will get run when the page loads for the first time. Right, so if I say console.log page started and I save, you won't be able to see the console, but let me just bring this here. You see page started. Let me refresh. Page started. Okay, cool. So now that that is working, we want to check inside here if the user is logged in or not. Now the way we're going to check that, we're going to look for a user object stored locally. If we don't find that user object, then we'll redirect the user to the login page. So I'm going to use local storage for that. We'll say local storage dot get item user it doesn't return a promise. And then we're going to console.log user to check if we have it or not. as you can see, we get a null here, so we don't have a user. So whenever we get a null, we need to redirect. Hold on a sec, I'm gonna try to resize everything properly here. Alright, so I hope this will work. So yeah, we're getting a null here, meaning we don't have any user. So we need to say if user is equals to null, then we want to use the router module to redirect the user, and we can get that by importing it private. I'm gonna give it a name of route, and it's router, and this is under Angular/router. So this is for redirecting, like moving between pages. So the login page has this route here. So if I go to Angular, to app routing, you see that this empty part takes us to this here, to the tabs module, and then we've got another part called login now. So if I remove tabs/tab1 and put login, I'm gonna go to this module here, and the same thing applies for register. So we want to go to this part, login, if the user is not registered. So we can do that by saying this dot router, this router here, dot navigate by URL, and then login. Then we want to replace the URL. So this will prevent, on a smartphone, it will prevent the user from going back, like when they get redirected, they won't be able to press the back button to come back to this page here. So let's save that and see if it'll work. And you can see we get redirected to log in. Let me see, and I'm trying to press the back button and it's not working, as you can see. So it's not highlighted anymore, like it's disabled, you can't press it. So yeah, it's because we've got this here. Right, so let's work on the login page then now. I'm gonna give this a class of ion padding, just to add some padding, and then I am gonna add an ion item, and in that ion item I'm gonna add an ion input, and the placeholder is gonna be email, and then I'm gonna add another one called password. And the type here will be text, and the type here will be password. And you see I get autocomplete because I'm using tab 9. Once I save that, this should be a password and this should be text. Cool. This is working perfectly. And let me just log in, and I'm just gonna change the color to primary just to make it look a bit nicer. Do I change it here? Color primary. No, it's not here. Change the toolbar, not the iron header. Okay. No, let's change this to dark because let's change this to dark. Yeah, just keep it consistent with the ion badges. Right, so I've got this input to take the email and one to take the password. Now let's add the button ion. I'm gonna put it under ion item as well. And then I'm gonna have an ion button. Log in, and the color will be dark, and what is this now? Let me save and see. Doesn't look good under the ion item. See, it adds this line here, so let's just put the button outside an ion item, and let's save. Right, so I wanna expand. I wanna make it a bit longer. Expand is equals to block. Right, cool. So I just want to add a bit of padding. So I want to push these items, the form a bit lower. Yeah, I want to push it a bit lower, so the form is in on content, so I'm gonna add padding top, and let's add 100 pixels. Okay, we'll get back to that. We might need to wrap the form in a div, and then we'll be able to do that, but we'll get back to that. Now I wanna map whatever I put here to a variable, and whatever I put here as the password to a variable, so that when I hit the login button, I'll send the data to the client. Right, first let's add a click listener here. Click equals to login. Right, we'll create this function in a bit, and then the input is we need ng model. So email, so this will map whatever we put here to a variable called email in our TypeScript file. We haven't created this variable, we haven't created this function as yet though. Then we need to do the same thing with the password. Save. Now we need to create those variables. We need email, which is type of string. We also need password, which is also type of string. Then we need that login function. This will get called when this button is clicked. And what you want to do, you want to let credentials be this object here. Pass the email. We'll also pass the password. Then we want to console log the credentials, console, just to check. Hit save and save it. Then when I hit login, you see we get the credentials here, getting the email and the password. So we're ready to send this to the server. Now to send stuff to the server, we need to use the HTTP module. So we need to come to app module. It's not imported anywhere here, so we need to import it. HTTP client module, press a comma, and we need to import. Why is it not finding it? Okay, I'm gonna import HTTP client module from @Angular HTTP Angular common /HTTP. Yeah, I think this is the one. Let me hover on top. Yeah, this is it. So we import it here, and then we also put it in here. Now that we've imported the HTTP client module, we can use the HTTP to make HTTP requests. Now in a real world application, you would have a service that will be responsible for making HTTP requests, but this is a beginner video. I'm not gonna complicate things. I'm gonna make the HTTP request within this file here. So we need to import the HTTP. The HTTP client. So I'm gonna call it HTTP, and then I'm gonna reference it HTTP client. HTTP client. Then I'm gonna import it. Right, this is how you import it here at the top. Here it's not HTTP client module, it's just HTTP. Don't get that confused. Okay, now we need to make our API request. So we can say HTTP this.http dot, remember our login is a post, so we need to make a post request to our URL. Let me open the server and make sure that is running. Yeah, it's running. What is the URL? Right, so the URL is /users/login. Remember the route from the previous video. Yeah, and then the second parameter is our object that we want to send to the client. So that object is credentials. Right, so this will return an observable. What that means is we can subscribe and we can subscribe to this observable and we can get the response from the server. Let's do that then. So to do that, we need to say .subscribe here. And then when you subscribe, we get a response, which is this, and we also get an error. So let's first handle the response. So let me console .log the response. So the response will be whatever the server sends back. Now we know that the server will send back the user that we're trying to log in with. And then the error will also be what the server sends back as the error. So we want to say console .log. Let's see what the error message says. Okay. Now let's try to log in. CV was it CV at CV1 at gmail.com. And the password was 1234. Let me start with the wrong password and see what I get. So let's send. And we are getting an unauthorized, just like we set it in the server. And you see the error says incorrect email or password. It's the same error that we got in Postman when we were testing the API. So let me put a correct password. Let me just clear this. Let me just make sure that I don't console this anymore. Yeah, so let's try that again with the correct credentials now. At gmail.com 1 2 3 4 5. Hit login. Now I'm getting the user back, meaning that everything went well. So this part of, so when I entered the wrong credentials, this part of the code was run, right? And now that I've entered the correct credentials, this part of the code gets run. I hope that that makes sense. Let me, so that you're gonna see everything. Right, so once we get the user, if everything goes well, we want to store the user in let me see what's is login looking for. We want to store it locally. We want to store it locally under user, so that when we get to this page and try to look for a user, this code will find the user, and then everything is going to be is going to work. You're not going to get redirected. Right, so to do that, we need to again to use local storage. Local storage dot set item this time, and it's user. Then we wanna, because this is a JSON, this is JSON, we need to stringify it, right? So that we're gonna store it locally. So we wanna say JSON dot stringify, and then res, which is response. So this is saved now. Now we wanna redirect the user. So we need to import the router here as well. I'll say private router. We're gonna have to import that. Now we want to say this dot router dot navigate by URL, and I'm just gonna put empty. I'm just gonna put nothing here, because remember, in the app routing module, nothing redirects you to the tabs, to the page with the tabs here. So I'm gonna put nothing here, and I want to prevent the user from pressing the back button, because we don't want them to go back to log in. Replace URL with true. Let's save this. Now I am, where is application? Okay, it's cool. Siviwe1 at Gmail. Sorry, one sec. One, two, three, four, five. Press login, and now we get redirected. And when we refresh, we don't get redirected to login anymore. Now let's see what we get here. So when the page comes in, it looks for the user, and if it doesn't find the user, you get redirected. So let's try to console log the user then and see what we get. Console.log user. So we want to see this user here. Let's hit save, and as you can see, the user is just a string. It's just a string. See, it's just a piece of string, because when we were saving the user, remember we stringified it. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. So to be able to get the properties of the of this user, maybe we want to get the profile picture and blah blah blah, we need to convert it back to JSON, right? So we can say JSON dot parse, and then we put the user inside here, save, and see what we get. Now we get a string, we get a JSON, so we can do whatever we want with this. Right, so login is working. Let's work on registration now. So give me one sec, I'm gonna put every value here, and then we're gonna register a user and see if that works. Right, so I went ahead and created the form here for registering. So it's pretty much the same as login. You've got the email, password, first name, last name, the picture URL, the bio, and here I'm asking the user if they are a service provider or not. And we're still gonna handle this function here. So if they say they are a service provider, we are gonna set this here, this variable is service provider, to true, so that the user will be able to select which service they providing. So this will only be visible if this is true. By default it's false. Right, yeah, and then when the user registered, we're gonna send the form over to the server, and yeah, we should get the same response as the one we got on Postman. So if the email was already taken, we should get the same response saying that the email is already taken. Yeah, so let's go ahead and try registering a user. So on the component, on the register component, I've already defined these variables here, right? So by default is service provider is false, and the service by default is none, right? And then everything is just undefined yet, and we are missing this function here. So let me create that function. As you saw, it passes an event, so we take in an event here, and then let us console.log e to see what we get. Right, so from login we need a link to go to the register page. So I can do this and say don't have an account, then I'm going to put a span register. Let me just make this strong instead. strong and context center. I want to center it. And then I want this to be clickable. So I will say router link is equals to, what am I doing? Is it inside here? Yeah, let me try this. Router link is equals to / register. I hope that will work. Now if I press here, it takes me to the register page. Cool. So let's see if this works. So this is this function here that we're calling. We want to console log E. So if I press yes and OK, we get this here. You see under details, we've got the value. Okay, so we can console.log e.details.value. So we will use this value to manipulate a service provider. So if I say no value, okay, is it detail or details? Let's try that one more time. No, and we're getting a no. If I say yes, we're getting a yes. Now notice the Y yes has a capital letter and this one is a small letter. That's because it's picking up these values instead. These ones here. So the same thing will apply here. It's going to pick up these values. Okay, cool. So we'll say now if, let's just put this in a variable. Let's respond be.detail.value. If response is equals to no, then this dot is service provider is equals to false. Else this dot service provider is equals to true. So now when we change this to yes, we should see this here. So we can now pick the service that we provide. If I change this to no and hit OK, this gets hidden. Cool. So we need the register function now. I'm gonna create it here. Now we need to create the user object. Okay. Password. First name. Last name. And is service provider. And the service. So like by default, if a user is not a service provider, the service that they provide is going to be none. And then in the front end, we're going to filter for, we're not going to show users with service provider that is none, because that will mean they're not service providers. And then we also need the pick. What else? Yeah, I think we've got everything. The bio. We don't have the bio here. also need a bio. Save that. So now we've got the user object created. We need to send this to the server. So we need that HTTP client module there. Not this one. It's from HTTP client. Now we need to make a post request again like we did with login. So we'll say this dot http dot post. It's going to be the same URL as login, but the last part will be different. So come back to login, paste, but we're registering now, register, and we are sending the user objects to the server. Then we need to subscribe here as well. And let me just bring this to the next line. And then this part of the code will run if everything goes correctly. Else we're gonna get an error, and let's just console.log the error. And if everything goes well, let's console.log the user that we just registered. Cool. So let's try that now. So let's try with the used email, cv1@gmail.com. 1 2 3 4 5. Save. Oh yeah, let me check CV Kaza. Let me just search for my picture. Okay, let's go back to the app. Where's the app? Right, so this is the URL, and best chef ever. And I am a service provider, and I am a chef. Press OK, and let's try to register. Now we are getting a 409, which is a conflict, because this email has already been used, and the error message is, it should be here. The error message is email already exists. So let's try another email. Let's try cv5. I'm gonna clear the logs, and let's try that again. And we have successfully registered. We're getting back the user that we just registered. Now you'll notice that one thing is missing. We don't have spinners, we don't have loaders, and when we get an error message, there's no pop-up saying an error occurred or something. So I'm gonna go back to the login page and implement that, but first I want to add a small text here that will take a user back to the login page. Copy and paste it here. So say already have an account, log in, log in, and I'll save that. So we can come to the login page, and this works fine. It works perfect. Okay, so let's work on the spinners and the pop-ups. Okay, cool. So let me add a spinner here at the bottom. Ion spinner, and let me save. And then let's add a class of Ion text center. Let's save. See if that will work. Okay, it's not working. Let me do this. Put a p tag, and I'm gonna paste that class there, and then I'm gonna put the Ion spinner inside this p tag. Hopefully that will work. Let's give that a try. It's working. Now we only want to show this spinner when there's an API request, right? So we need to come to the login component and say is loading. It's going to be a boolean, and by default it's going to be false, right? So we want to show this when is loading is true. So we'll say ngf is loading. Save. So now it's not showing. Now when we make an API request, the first thing we want to do, we want to say is loading, this.isLoading is equals to true, because now we just hit the login button, so there should be an indicator there showing that this button has been clicked. And then once the request is finished, so there's two things that's going to happen. It's either the request is going to be successful. We want to remove the spinner when that happens, or the request is going to be unsuccessful. Again, we want to remove the spinner. Now here, if this piece of code gets run, if the credentials are not correct, we want to show I'm going to show a pop-up message saying, like, basically showing the message that the server sends. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Ionic documentation, and let me go to the Ionic documentation. And you will use this a lot, guys. Like when you're building Ionic applications, this is going to be very useful. So this is a alert. I want to use an alert, and it's something like this. Yeah, I want to use this. Let me grab a piece of code here. Just want a simple one. Yeah, let me grab this one. So we will need the alert controller from Ionic Angular, so we will import it here, and then we will use it here. Okay. What am I doing? Right, so let's go back to the app. Let me paste the alert function here at the bottom. So I wanna take the header, which is gonna be a string, and the message. So I want this to be like, I want these messages to be dynamic. I don't need the subheader, and this header message will come from header, right? And then the message will come from message here. And then we want to use the alert controller, so we need to inject it here. Private alert controller, and alert controller, we need to import it from Angular. Now everything is working fine, like we don't have an error. So let us try to input wrong credentials and see what we get. You saw that the loader went, and then it showed, and then it went away as soon as the request was finished. So let's see where to get. So it's under error, right? So if we get an error, we want to call this function, this dot present alert, and we need to pass the header message. I'm going to say login failed. So this is going to be the header message, and the message is going to come from the server. We want to pass this message here. So we will say error, which is this error here, this object, right? And dot error, this error here, and then we want to, inside we've got error again. This is coming from the server. This error is coming from the server. It's this here. It's this error here. So if we can change this to message if we want, but I'm just gonna keep error. So don't get confused. So dot one more error, right? So let's save that. Now we're no longer console logging anything. So I'm gonna put gibberish again, and I'm gonna click login. Notice we're gonna get the spinner for like split second, and then it will quickly go away because the server is running locally, so it's pretty fast. So hit login. You probably did not see it because it's really fast, guys, but as you can see now we are getting incorrect email or password, right? This is coming from the server. Hit OK. Now we need to do the same thing for register. I'm gonna copy this. Now in a real world application, you will have this in like a separate service, and there won't be any copying and pasting. Like you'll have it in a service and then you'll reuse it. So register, I'm gonna paste this again here, and I am gonna import whatever needs to be imported, like so. Come back to register and import this. Save, and we are missing the spinner. So is loading, we need that. Is loading is false. When you hit register, is loading should be true. Should be this. dot. And then once this is done, once the registration is done, successful, is loading what has to be false. And if we get an error, is loading is going to be false again. And then we will present this here. Say present this dot present alert, and it wants a header registration failed. And then again we want to say error, this error dot the error inside, and then dot the error which we defined. So this is the message. It's the same thing that we have here. Okay, cool. Let's try that now. Let's try registering a user with an email address that has already been used. cv1@gmail.com. Just gonna put gibberish here. No, I'm not a service provider. Oh, we forgot one thing. We forgot the spinner. So we need to put the spinner right at the end of this button. Let's save that. Hit register. Email already exists. So now we are basically done with registering and logging in from the app. The only thing that's missing now on the register page is if we successfully register a user, we want to save that user in local storage and then redirect the user to the login page like we did for register. So if everything goes well, we just want to do the same thing as this here. So this is the success. We need to import the router. Private router, and we're using the Angular router. Import that. Save. Now let's try to register a brand new user. New user at email.com. 1 2 3 4 5. New user. No. Say hi. Oh, my keyboard. And no, I'm not. Let me just say yes, I'm a service provider and I provide lights. And now let's register the user. It's registering, and it worked, and we are getting back the user. As you can see, now this is stored locally in local storage. Let me show you. If I go to application, you see this is stored locally now. Right, so in the next video we are gonna look at creating this, fetching these items from the server, these users, these service providers from the server, and then we are also gonna work on filtering. Cheers guys.